simply must just go live, and that's what I've done. I wish I'd trimmed my nostril hair before I went live, because then I wouldn't be scratching at my nose and forcing people to see that as the start of this live. But whatever, here we are. Happy Friday. Welcome to June. I'm going to pour the tea live as we do. It's time for that live pouring of the tea. Here it comes. See that? Oh yeah, that's good stuff. Right over my keyboard. Do you guys ever catch yourself doing stuff like that where you're like, this will be daring, and then rather than daring, what actually happens is you destroy your keyboard? I spilt an entire martini on my laptop maybe like a couple months back. And so what happens when you spill an entire martini on the keyboard of a laptop is it makes the keyboard very sticky, which is it was risky. America, this is exactly, good morning. That's exactly what I discovered. I think you mean pouring tea over the keyboard is risky, but spilling a martini right on your laptop keyboard is very risky. So anyhow, I shut it down immediately, and I took it into the store, and they're like, this is a very common problem, which was kind of nice because I didn't feel like a total doofus. And I was also like, oh, interesting. It's really a common thing that people, in my mind, I heard specifically martinis are commonly spilled on laptop. Anyhow, with Apple's Apple Care, which I have, it's interesting. What they do is that you have your laptop that opens like a clam, and they just replace the entire bottom half of the laptop. So they replace the keyboard, they replace the mouse pad, the battery, everything on the bottom part there gets replaced, with the exception of like the logic board and that sort of stuff. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I got a fancy, turn that off. Got a fancy new keyboard. So if you have Apple Care and your keyboard is somewhat broken, what you're going to want to do is spill a martini on it. That's the one secret trick that liquor stores love, but Apple Care hates. It allows you to get a new keyboard. We got 6 viewers that I can see right here. If you are one of these, oh, it's just 5. Someone dropped off because they got the one trick and they've gone to go do it and it blew up their computer. But if you're one of these 5 people right here where I'm gesturing, there we go, then put your name down there. Put your name here so I know who you are, because it's more fun if we know each other. And you, at this point, probably know who I am. I'm Adam. So say hello, bring yourself into the space. Let's kick off this June proper. Oh, that's nice hot tea. I like a good hot tea. It's been roasting here in Victoria. Oh, hola, hola, David. We were just talking, and now I'm talking to you here live. That's cool. Victoria is glorious right now. It's been super hot. In Celsius, AO, Craig, AO, in Celsius, I can't convert to Fahrenheit because there's all this weird stuff you have to do for Fahrenheit. I think you divide by 5/8 and then add 32. Is that right? Which always felt weird to me. In Celsius, anyhow, we've been getting up to 30 degrees, and we're not even in summer yet. And for some people, some of our listeners, viewers, that won't be that hot, but Victoria is widely known for, well, I don't know how widely, but it's like we're known for our temperate climate. So during the summer, we're not too hot, and during the winter, we're not too cold. Tend to hang out in a nice little temperature range. So we've all been melting, and it's been beautiful. But I've got a great big, I don't know if you can see it, I've got a really good sunburn. You can kind of see right there on the back, and there's a a mark where I was wearing a chain. And the way this sunburn happened, part of what contributed to this sunburn, this is not the way it happened, but I was, Raf, get off of me. Get off my jock. Raf says, happy Friday. Is this your idea of quote unquote taking a break? I'm going to speak to that. I'm going to speak to that in one moment. And yes, it is. But it's a good question. So anyhow, I took my car downtown because it was due for service. So I drove downtown. And then you know that thing you do when you get yourself ready, you drive downtown, you've got 2 calls scheduled, some connection calls, chat with some friends. You let one of them know, like, hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late. I got to drop my car off for service, blah, blah, blah. So I pulled into the service department, and then I realized, oh, the appointment's tomorrow. I drove all the way into town and was going to have to do it again later on. Hey, Carol, sunny Colorado. What is the temperature like in Colorado? Fill me in. Tell me the details. And hi. Which part of Colorado? I have a very good friend, my friend Michelle Aiken, who's moving to, I think she's moving to Boulder. And I have another good friend, both of those people, the one I'm about to tell you about, and Michelle, I used to train coaches with. Another friend, Sarah Schneider, moved to Colorado recently. That's a hot spot to be in. So I drove downtown. I realized I'm a dork, but I'm here, so I'm going to enjoy this. And I had my calls, and I thought, you know what? The weather's glorious. There's all these beautiful patios. I'm going to grab a coffee. I'm going to sit on the patio and just enjoy this weather. And so I found a nice shady spot. Hey, Allison, great to see you. Hey, Katie. Oh, Miami. Oh my goodness, it must be a boiling. Uh, and Boulder, yeah, Carol, that's the place that my friend is moving to. It is booming, to Katie's point, and it sounds, all the houses I've seen there look glorious. So anyhow, this is an interesting situation that happened to me. I'm sitting in the shade. I've scouted out the shade. Like I've already sat in the sunny pot spot, and I'm eyeing this one person who's clearly going to get up to move. It's sort of seat yourself area. It's just you buy your coffee indoors, and you come outside, you sit on this lovely patio. The person moves. I go over there. I grab the spot. I get myself all set up. Put sunglasses there. Don't need them anymore. We're in shady land. Um, and I'm working. It's all going good. There's some people to my right sitting 6 feet away because we're all maintaining social distance. And this guy comes up and says, "Oh, can I use this chair?" And the chair's like that far away from me. And I'm like, "Yeah, just get some distance." And he's like, "Sure." And he moves it like 3 inches over. I'm like, "Oh man, what's going on here? Is this going to be one of those conversations?" And um, and so it turns out it is one of those conversations. And I say, "You're going to need to give me some room." And so he turns to the people beside me and asks them to move. And they're like, "Well, no, we're here. You need to move." And he says, "Well, I need to sit in the shade." And we're all very sympathetic to this because that's why we're sitting where we're sitting. And I say, "Well, you need to give me 6 feet of separation. And, what are you going to do?" He says, "Well, I've got to sit in the shade. And so, I'm going to sit here." And so this is one of those situations where um, I'm kind of like, great. So I guess my options here are I can choose to make a principled stand. I can really be difficult about this. I can start a fight if I want. I can stand my ground. And there's a part of me in this moment, the part of me that was willing to be a bulldog in a litigation battle as a lawyer. Um, so that part of me was like, "Okay, motherfucker, you're stepping over onto my porch. Now is where the battle begins." And then there's another part of me that was like thinking a couple things. The first one is this guy I'm pretty certain has a degree of Asperger's. He feels spectrum E. So I'm not sure how cued into the social cues he's getting from me and the people across from me are. And I'm also like, how important is this to me really? And so, and then the last thing that occurs for me is in any interaction where there's not really a way to say this that might not put me at risk of sounding a little arrogant, so I'm just going to say it. But in any interaction where there's some friction, the person with the higher level of consciousness is the one who kind of has to go first. So as an example, what I mean is if you get into a fight with someone or into a fight or like an argument with a friend and um, you care about that relationship, so you want to heal the relationship, what's human for both of us is we're both going to naturally hold that we're right. And the really simple place for us to end up is I'm right about this and they should apologize. And the truth is you're both right. There's an apology for both sides, et cetera, et cetera. And so the person with the higher level of consciousness is the one that has to go first. Hey, even though there's a part of me that wants to like buckle down, even though I was here first, even though this person just rolled up and is trying to usurp my shady place, is it really worth the fight and the argument and fighting for some principle that doesn't really matter when I could just get up and move again? So that's what I ended up doing. And Afterwards, he later came over and like apologized and said, I was happy to sit in the sun. I don't really need you to do that. I'm like, well, you clearly weren't. You didn't really give me any choice, and it's fine. Now, please stop talking to me and back up because you're not wearing a mask. So that led to a bit of the sunburn on the back of my neck. I didn't have to get that sunburn. I could have turned around. I could have just gotten up and left. I could have made a principled stand. I'm not really upset about the sunburn. It's nice to get to be in the sun, but it was an interesting situation to sort of be in. Like, oh, here's a situation where someone is just charitably, I'd say, oblivious to the social kind of norms that are around. Hey, we're all trying to get through this together. Of course, you want the shade. We all do. I was here first. We're all doing our best. So we have to make a decision somewhere along the way. And the decision I made was, I don't need to make a fight. I don't need to create a bunch of discomfort for everyone around me. Let's just move. It's easier for me to be with moving than I think it's going to be for this person to be with having to sit in the sun or whatever is going to come out of this if I stand in it. So anyhow, yeah, so that's that. Now to your penetrating question, Raf, who says, is this your idea of taking a break? He's really calling me to task here. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, Raf. This is exactly my idea of taking a break. So what Raf's referring to, first of all, is I take June and December off. I talked about this last week. I take all of that month off. And what people often, not always, but people often envision that means is I'm off the grid entirely. I don't check Facebook, or we all have our kind of idea of what it means to take a break. For me, what it means to take a break, if you look at my calendar, you're going to see that I've got a call after this with a friend. There's a whole bunch of conversations I'm in just connecting with people. There's even some conversations I'm in with people that, hey, Whitney, nice to have you with us. There's even some conversations I'm in with people that are like wanting to work with me or something like that. And I'm still doing lives. I'm still doing my podcast. The part of it that's a break is there's very little scheduled, for the most part, during this month. If people want to connect with me, it's like we schedule a couple of days in advance and no further. Hey, Jess, I like your city as well as my city. And where I really look is like, would it fill my cup? Would it source me to do this? And so one, this conversation, getting to be with all you people and like sharing in what gets co-created, and in truth, discovering with you the answers that come forward to the topics that we've all created here, that really energizes me. And so I want to just come back around to speak to what I just said there, discovering with you. So like we've got all those topics over there. I don't know what the answer is. I don't have it planned out. There's no sheet. This has writing on it, but it's not the answer to those topics. None of this is prearranged. So it's kind of like, oh, let's get into a space together. Let's bring some topics. Let's see what we discover today through that process. And when you guys share what you are getting from it or the questions that come up from you, we're all learning together. So that really sources me. It's not like a bunch of work that I'm showing up and doing. I feel like there was another part that I was going to say to that, but it's flipped out of my head. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. So it's cool. Oh, that's what the other part was. If I left my day entirely empty, that doesn't really serve me. So it actually serves me to have some degree of structure in my life, in my days off. If all I did was get up and sit on a beach from 9 till 5 and then came home and ate dinner and then watched TV, that wouldn't really do much for my well-being. It would actually be quite detrimental, because what would start to happen is I'd get bored. I'd have a yearning to like make something happen, to bring something into the world. I'd miss out on the connection. Hey, Carl, long time no talk, man. Nice to have you with us. I would probably almost very predictably start to drink earlier and earlier and earlier in the day. And over time, what would happen is I would become, I don't want to say less productive. What I would be producing, though, would be consuming more. I'd be consuming more media. Let me know if you guys can hear the incredible loud noise of them mulching all of the hedge that they're trimming on my property. So let me know if that's coming through the mic. I can hear it. I don't think you can, but please let me know. So what would happen without any structures, I become very consumptive. I consume media, I consume video games, I consume TV. I'm basically consuming to quell the boredom and the lack of stimulation that I'm generating. So instead of generating stimulation, what starts to happen is that I just consume it. Okay, that's awesome. Thanks, Andrew. But just wait, because we're about to start feeding stuff through the mulcher machine. With structure and this, what gets created is I get to generate stuff, and this actually creates some stimulation. So I don't want to make this sound a little too fairy tale-y, but like at the end, part of the reason I do this show is at the end of our time together, I'm on a high. I'm energized. I'm excited, and that carries me forward. And from there, I'll do some of the other projects that I really want to make happen. Like I want to rearrange this office, clean it up, do some work there. I've got a whole bunch of projects that are laid out, clear out my closet, stuff like that. So that's the answer to your question, Raf, is that this actually is part of how I take a break effectively. This is what sources and serves me. We've got some awesome topics here. Thanks everyone that submitted something. Let's dive into them. That feels fun. Jess, I'm going to read what you said here, which is, I also need structure. I used to make that mean I was doing rest wrong. I like your distinction of doing things that source. Yeah, 100%, right? Like, and you can, I don't want to put this on Raf, but like, so Raf's asking a great question, and it'd be very easy for me to take that through the lens you just described, Jess, right? Like, I'm not resting the way I am. And in fact, that's not an uncommon thing. Like sometimes people will sort of ask that question, like, part of what happens is that I take a month off or 2 months off becomes too good to be true. Like you can't really have that. Then they see what I'm doing during my month off, which is like some of this sort of stuff, and then that allows them to reinforce their existing paradigm and context about how it's too good to be true. Oh, look, Adam says he's taking a month off, but he's not really. Blah 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 blah. So, and all of that is inside the kind of context of there's a right way to take time off. All there is however is empowering for you to take time off. That's all there really is. So now the trap there is that some people will say, oh, well, I just work 24 hours a day and that sources me. And for a lot of people, they're just oblivious to how undernourished they are. So we have to be careful with this stuff. How I've arrived here is with a lot of conversation with my coach and getting supported, and initially taking time off where I really didn't schedule anything. I was like, fuck you, schedule and structure. I'm going to be the teenager who's got that month off, school's out, summer, and I'm just going to hang out and do whatever. And I found that really, what's the best way to describe it? Challenging doesn't quite do it justice. I found it really detrimental to my well-being, because a month with nothing planned, like I said, I just started drinking sooner and sooner. I started consuming more and more, and by the end of that month, there was a lot of self-loathing because I wasn't generating Adam Quiney into the world. I was just Adam Quiney receiving the world passively, and that's not very enjoyable for me. It's not really what I'm on this planet to be expressed as. Okay, enough about this time off stuff. Let's get to work. Let's get real. I've got a couple great questions from Cam. The first, they're now mulching stuff. Can you guys hear that? Let me know. It's the last time I'm going to ask. So Cam says, first, David says you could do an intense Vipassana meditation retreat for a month. Last June, one of the things I did was a vision fast. So it was a week-long container. I was up on a mountain on a neighboring island. Great, thanks guys. Up on a mountain on a neighboring island, and then for four of those days, 3 of the days were the setting up of the container, the ritual surrounding it, and then the ritual closing the container, ending the container. But 4 of those days were spent in an 8-foot by 8-foot diameter circle by myself with no food, 3 liters of water for the entire 4 days, and that was it. So I had a tarp, I had a sleeping bag and a pillow, I had water, and I had a shaker, a rattle. to sometimes shaking evokes spirits. And that was the whole thing. The vision fast lasted for 4 days doing that. And I got to tell you, it was, it's a little different from Vipassana, especially if you're doing Vipassana for a month. But like the interesting thing about that was food is very stimulating. And so it wasn't, the hunger pangs were not an issue at all. I didn't really experience hunger because I wasn't allowed to move. I was just seated or standing or lying down in this little 8-foot, literally a circle I could put my arms out or stretch myself out in. And that was the full extent of my space. What was challenging was just the sheer nothingness of it. Being with absolutely no stimulation at all confronts you with you. There's nothing else other than you. That was really challenging. What does ERG in capitals mean, Raf? You're on the erg. Oh, like you're rowing? Is that what you're doing? You're erging it up, getting your ergs on? Good for you, man. And then David follows up by saying, I could do a month full of meditation and psychedelics, plant medicine, and then some video games. I may just do that. Okay. Let's go to our first topic. So Cam asks, he's got a couple of questions. How do we evolve past that point of, and he puts this in quotes, becoming aware, excuse me, becoming aware of the areas that we need to grow in and move into embodiment of them? I used to think, this is Cam saying, I used to think, well, now that I'm aware of this, I'll be able to move past it. Now that I'm aware of that reaction, I'll be able to prevent it. This has not turned out to be the case. So how do we go from our awareness into actually creating something? So this is probably the most important distinction that we can work with in transformation, because the awareness is, I don't want to say it's easy or simple, because it requires something on our parts to be willing to be aware of something that is currently in our blind spots. Our ego actively resists seeing that which is in our blind spots. That's its job. Its job is like, don't ignore that. That's not true. So like some of the ways our resistance sounds like is, I disagree with that. Or I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's actually that. Or, oh, well, I get over there, I kind of do this. But actually, what you're calling that is actually, so these are all examples of how something's being reflected to someone. And then rather than surrender to that reflection and really take a look at it, they're explaining how it's not what's being reflected. They're finding ways to like kind of move it back into the comfortable world that they know that is not in their blind spot. So we want to start this conversation by saying, like, by applauding, really, hey, way to go to anyone that's created a degree of awareness. And this is often what plant medicine gifts us, and often what people are given through what I would call like peak experience moments. A peak experience moment would be going somewhere like a Tony Robbins event and like getting hit with the thunderbolt of awareness. We're like, holy fuck, I can see stuff that I couldn't see before. I'm aware of it. So first of all, amazing. It's an essential part of our journey to become aware of it, to understand on an intellectual level what's actually happening as opposed to what we presupposed was happening. And having said that, awareness is the booby prize, as Werner Erhard puts it. Understanding, knowing, being aware of something, that's, while it is important, while it's an essential part of the journey, while it has value, while we want to applaud people for their awareness that they've generated, that's just the beginning of the journey. And the trap is that because it's challenging just to be willing to look into our blind spots, when we move through that work and are finally willing to face it, we can kind of be like, oh, that was so hard, but I'm so glad I'm through the worst of it. We're not through the worst of it. In fact, we've barely just begun. And so the real work for people that want to create transformation in their lives is to move from mere awareness to actually acting, living, and being that which they are now aware of. If you become aware that who you actually are is connection, and that the strategies and patterns you've been running your life with all are designed to prevent you from being from leaning into that which you're afraid of. The fantasy is like, oh, amazing. Now that I can see that this is what I'm afraid of, now that I can see I've just been doing that stuff because I'm scared to embody who I really am. The fantasy there is like, well, now that you can see that, why would you keep doing it? But you'd keep doing it because your fear is real. You'd keep doing it because there is a point in your life. I'll get a bit of height in this chair. How do I raise this? I don't know how I raise this chair. Is it this button? There we go. That's a bit more height. I want to be tall. You created this 30-year or 40-year or 20-year or however long year pattern because it got you here, because it allowed you to thrive and to stay safe and to bring you here. And what happens is that people hold these patterns with such little reverence, right? Thinking like, oh, the only reason I do this is because I was oblivious to it. The obliviousness is what makes it so effective. But becoming aware does nothing to change the fact that your fears are real and there for a reason, and that you created this for a really valid reason, a really valid intention. And so this is where the work really begins, is like, oh, now I've got awareness of this. Now I actually have to take the action that's in alignment with this new way of being, and the old way of being, the old patterns, the old beliefs that kept me doing that stuff that I no longer want to do, they have gravity to them. They're going to pull me back in that direction. So here's an example in my own life. There was a point where I got some really powerful feedback. And what was reflected to me was like, Adam, who you are is connection. You come into a room and the room is more connected. It's natural. You love to know more about people. You want to connect with them deeply. You're fascinated by people. People love to connect with you. There's a magic to the connection that you bring into the space. And you've learned to run away from that. You either run away by trying to do all the doing of connection without any of the being. So you like talk a whole bunch, but there's no actual real human that's being connected with. Just like a series of scripts that are running that are charming and glib, but not actually real. Or you go introversion. So you either do extreme extroversion or extreme introversion, where you just hang out at home and you're fine not going to the party because who even cares about parties, and it's all fine and good because you're happy with life the way it is. So getting that reflection, I was like, oh my God, I can see the truth of this. I can see all the places where I run away from connection. I can see how exhausting parties are for me, where I'm at a party and each person I connect with, I've got to like run the game. I've got to do the Adam show. Oh my God, it's so tiring for me. It's so tiring for them. No wonder I go home and just want to spend time with my managers. It's less work. It's less exhausting. So now I had this awareness. I was like, oh, fuck, wow, there's a different possibility available. But I still had to step into it. I still had to live from that new way of being. And so one of the ways that happened, I wrote about this not too long ago, was I can remember after this awareness, I was standing at a bus stop and I was on my way to law school. And there's two guys talking off in the distance. And one of them I knew because we'd both worked at the free legal clinic that, you could come and get some legal advice for free from law students, blah, blah, blah. And I saw this guy, Ben was his name, over there talking to some guy I didn't really know. He was in a year below me. And I was like, oh, I should go and connect with them because that's who I am. But my fear was like, don't do that. That's going to be obtrusive. They don't know who you are. You're going to be a dork. It had a million reasons why not. And so until the moment, what ended up happening is I stared at my phone, sweated a bunch, kept making myself wrong for looking at my phone and not going and talking to them. And eventually the bus came, we got on, and I got on the bus and I walked over to them and I said, hey, Adam, Ben, right? And then we started to talk, which was terrifying. And then slowly it stopped being terrifying because he was like, oh yeah, free legal clinic. And then we just started to chat. And there was something I really discovered in that day. It was like, oh, wow, it's terrifying to do this. And it doesn't mean that my fear is right. Until I went and sat down beside them and said, hey, Adam, Ben, right? Until that moment, the idea that I'm connection, that I do all of this stuff just from fear is merely an idea. It just lives in my head. And it's interesting, but who cares? And even worse, because I'm not acting into it, because I'm not living from this new belief, this new relationship to who I am, Now my awareness actually becomes worse than before because I use it as a stick to hit myself in the head with. Oh, who you are is connection atom, and here you are being a coward and you're not doing the thing you want to do, and blah, blah, blah. So this is what often happens with people. They get a piece of awareness, and then rather than it actually moving them forward into their life, it becomes one more stick to beat themselves up with. Yes, Jess, I'm with you. Our fears become sneakier and sneakier and more sophisticated, as do we. So this is something I see a lot where people go and have peak experiences, like an ayahuasca ceremony, or or Tony Robbins events, or Landmark. If they go and do the Landmark Forum, Landmark Forum is, I think these days it's a 2-weekend large group, potent reflection, and like, hey, we're pulling the wool off of your eyes. We're going to help you see all of this. Tony Robbins, big event that we've all heard about and seen, and an ayahuasca ceremony. If you've never done plant medicine, boom, it's a lot of awareness. And because of how profound that awareness feels for people, they end up feeling a lot like Cam does in his question, which is like, well, now that I'm aware of this, I'm going to move past this. Like, I can't go back, right? Here, that can't. So there's an element of add effectness in this. It's impossible for me not to act into this. And what that language reveals to us is that they're kind of relating to this, like, I don't have to, they're not consciously thinking this, but they're sort of like, in that language is, I don't have to make the scary choice. It's going to happen automatically. It's impossible for me to go back to the old way. This awareness is just too profound. And as soon as that's the way we're holding it, sure enough, we're going to slowly but surely have the gravity of that old way of being pull us back to it. Think of it like a wagon rut that you've been traveling along for 30 years. It doesn't take much for you to slip into that wagon rut. And so this is frankly why I have a job. This is why coaching is a thing, is it's so much more than just awareness, but most people trade purely on awareness. And that's why a lot of people become awareness junkies. A lot of people go to coaches and like what they do is they show up each week ready for that next hit of awareness because it feels good in the moment. And they're like, yeah, I'm doing some work. And they are, but they're not doing the harder work, the more challenging work of living into the life that awareness would then allow. So stepping into that. And the coach isn't supporting them to do that either, because that's a little dirtier. It's a little less fun. And it's more fun to just like, let's just keep having the awareness and the insight, and we'll call it deep coaching. Oh, blah. Sarah, would you be willing to share? Sarah says Landmark was a bad trip for me. Hey, Sarah, by the way. So fascinating how different people can experience things. Would you be willing to share what about your Landmark experience was a bad trip? Because I think for a lot of people that happens, and there's some really juicy stuff that I'd love to talk about if you're willing to share. And if you'd rather not, that's totally fine as well. Hello, Ms. Huweiler. Did I say it right? Is that how I say your last name, Anna? I'm working on it. I've been practicing. Oh, is it? I think it's a Huvile, right? And it's Swiss German, which is like kind of a fancier version of Swiss and German. It's upper crust of both of those cultures is what that is. I recommend you follow her because she's always posting these gorgeous photos of her backyard, and which is like Alps and mountains and like awesome dogs and stuff. I'm very jealous. Yeah, Jess says she's an awareness junkie in recovery, and I think I think we kind of have to go. We have to bankrupt this. So what tends the hero's journey of some of this, I don't know if this really matches with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, but I'm going to call it the hero's journey. The path many of us have to walk is at first getting the awareness and just being blown apart by it and like, oh my goodness, this awareness is really profound. Things are going to be different. And then not have things be different, and then go back for more awareness, and then not have things be different. And we kind of have to bankrupt that before we're willing to try what's next, before we're willing to surrender. Wow, the awareness alone is not that. And some people never bankrupt that. Some people just perpetually find new, so they'll go from one coach to the next coach to the next coach. Then when they get tired of that, they'll start doing the Tony Robbins events. Then they'll start doing like an ayahuasca ceremony. Then they might even find their way to a program like the Forge, where we're intentionally breaking down the awareness junkie, and even then they'll resist it because that's what happens when we're not willing to surrender to the bankruptcy of what isn't working. But for a lot of people, what'll happen is they'll get to the point where this becomes bankrupt, where they're like, awareness isn't working. And then there's kind of one of two paths that they'll often go down. One is resignation. So I guess I just have to be okay with things the way they are. I guess that things actually can't change. So they resign themselves that things can't be different. And then it's really like an empowered resignation, because they, given that things can't be different, how do I optimize within them? That's okay. It's a little heartbreaking because it's like the end of possibility for them. The other path they'll go down is, given that just getting more awareness isn't working, I think I need something more. I need something beyond this. And those are often the people that find their way, for whatever reason, I guess something spiritual, to Bay and I. So often a lot of the people, a lot of my clients come to me after they've done a bunch of work with a bunch of coaches and are like, it's kind of funny because it's almost like, I don't think coaching can work, but I really want it to. Can we have a conversation, Adam? And so there's a lot of like completing how it's gone in the past, tidying that up, helping them get past the way it didn't work, and to really empower the bankruptcy rather than to feel disempowered by it, so that they can then create the next thing. That's kind of the journey. Yeah, the second I said Anna's name right. So how do we move from awareness to transformation? The number one way we do that is getting into a structure that's going to support you doing that. And I think the best way to do that is to work with deep coaches, coaches that are deep in their work, coaches that occur to you like their being is transformed and transformative. It doesn't have to be a coach; it can be anyone, right? But there's a natural, in Leon Vanderpool's book, A Shift in Being, which I've recommended a number of times on this show. When someone has taken on a lot of transformational work, their very being, the presence, being in their presence, is in itself transformational. And so they don't have to be coaches, but there is a natural, like, it's almost like once someone's done enough work, just by being with them, you become coached. So it doesn't have to be someone calling themselves a coach, but if you really want to move from awareness to transformation, get into structures that stand for that. Those structures are frustrating sometimes, because the reason we hang out in awareness, the reason we get addicted to awareness, is because it allows us to have the illusion that we're taking on our work while not having to confront the fears that are in the way of what's next for us. And confronting your fears is unpleasant and uncomfortable typically. It'd be weird if it wasn't. If fear was like, amazing, I love fear, let's run towards it, well, then we'd all be just transforming naturally. I'd have no job. None of us would be in this conversation, and I'd be taking my break the right way, and whatever there is to do with that. So seek out structures that really hold your feet to the fire this way, that don't allow you to just get awareness. That's really the trick, Ken. I'll share, like, there's often a point where, so I still get clients, I front load as much as this is possible, and I still get clients that want awareness. They're drawn to that. And there's usually a point where we, like, for the first 2 months, really, we're just learning how to be in relationship with each other. I'm reflecting, I'm being coached with them, but a lot of it is me training them to be a client, just supporting them to know how to empower structure in their life, to support them, to empower them being the leader of the conversation, them being the leader in their lives, rather than the way most of us start out coming to this work is like, so Adam, here's where I am, tell me what to do. That's the antithesis of this work, but it's how we're trained by the world around us. Boss, things aren't working. What should I do? Do this. Okay, great. I'm doing it. Great. Now it's working. Thank you. Or it didn't work. What else should I do? I don't have any ideas. I'm out of ideas. But as time goes on and we do that training, there's usually a point where my job more and more becomes reflecting to the client how they keep showing up for more awareness and nothing seems to be changing. And then they show up next week, and what their ego is going to try to do is take that reflection and make that the new awareness. Oh my God, you're right, Adam. I noticed that even though I got more awareness last week, it didn't move me forward. Oh my God. So notice the ego takes it and is like, great, we'll bring that into the game as well. And then they want to have another conversation where they create more awareness around that. And sooner or later, there's like a really the stand that is called for from me becomes really stark, which is like, hey, do you actually want things to be different? Great. What actions do you need to take to make that happen? Great. How are you going to get in the way? Great. What structure is going to support you to not have it go that way? And so that's where things we start to look into, like, making donations to political campaigns that you hate if you don't follow through with what you say you're going to do. And we don't jump there. That's not to always do this, but there's a point where people have to walk out the door. They have to take that step. And that's at least early on, people relate to that part of coaching as less fun, because it is less fun. It's more fun just to have awareness. It's the fun thing. Yeah, Whitney says she experienced that with someone, Evan, who's in the Forge with us and on our leadership team. Might be on our leadership team in the coming year. Whitney experienced that sitting with him, saying like, hey, what's up with this guy? He's not even saying that much, but just being with him, it is oddly transformational. So that's the magic of, as you do more of your own work and allow transformation in your own life, it naturally pushes out into the world. Let's see what you wrote, Sarah. Thanks for sharing. So Sarah says, speaking about Landmark, I noticed I was responding to things in the same way as other participants. People crying at the same time, for one example. My husband noticed me sounding strange on the phone and tried to find out more about the course, and they wouldn't tell him, whilst I was being told to, in effect, leave him. My husband and two friends organized an intervention as they were that concerned. I also said a bunch of stuff to my parents, as encouraged to do on the course, but actually it didn't serve me or them. Thankfully, I went on to do the Hoffman process and cleared up on that piece with my parents. So, Landmark I found forced rather than a natural transformation. I thought my mission might be to save people from Landmark. That soon passed, thank goodness, each to their own. Got it. So, one, totally just honor that was your experience of it, Sarah, and don't want to take away from that at all. And then I want to share my perspective for how some of that gets created. And my intention is to, without diminishing in any way, shape, or form, to create a bit of altitude for some of what happens in a lot of these programs and why it happens the way it does. So I'm intending to broaden this out so that we can have a much larger conversation rather than this be like, well, Sarah, you shouldn't feel that way because blah, blah, blah. Not at all. Totally honor that was your experience. So the first thing with a lot of programs like Landmark, and indeed like the coach training program I used to lead, Accomplishment Coaching, programs that are deeply ontological, which is to say rooted in addressing who we're being and confronting us with the way we're being that we cannot see, our blind spots, our ontological blind spots. A lot of those programs operate, one, they're going to be confronting. They're going to be confronting because they're taking something that we've kind of built a life around not seeing, not intentionally, but that's how we create our life. They built a life around something. They confront us with the thing we've built a life around not seeing. So first and foremost, anytime that is put in front of us, we're going to have an experience of confrontation, and then we're going to show up however we know to show up from being confronted. Again, mostly obliviously. For example, when homie came and took my shady seat and it was like, well, I just have to sit in the shade. What my automatic to do there would be is to like just double barrel shotgun of vicious, like very emotionless argument in his face, obliterate him. And that was a conscious moment. I was aware of that, but especially early on when we don't have a lot of work, all of this is oblivious. So we have ways we're naturally going to show up from being confronted. And further, those programs are then designed, their intention is to point to that. So rather than if we use me as the example, rather than get into the argument with me and try to prove their point, that's going to be a losing game. Because one way or the other, as long as I've got you in an argument with me, it doesn't really matter who wins or loses. We're now doing this instead of actually addressing the thing that they've showed me. So their job is, one, to put something in your face you don't want to look at, two, have that drive up your confront, and then three, not engage with that, which is really infuriating. So that's the first, that's just some context for these kind of ontological programs. Second, when that happens, our experience tends to be, this is wrong. Something is wrong here. I'm not comfortable. And then we reach for stuff like, I don't feel safe, blah, blah, blah. That sort of stuff naturally comes forward. I'm not intending to make any of this right. I'm intending to help us see the inevitable, the predictable and almost inevitable way that it will go anytime we're trying to do really deep transformational work. Now, so you've got all that. That's going to take a high level of mastery and an ability to hold a really potent container. Then the next part of it is that a lot of this work also involves raising, like training the leadership of the people leading. So Landmark, accomplishment coaching, and probably a few other programs, not so much being a leader, which is what Werner is now doing. He founded Landmark, now he's doing being a leader. But a lot of these programs, the Forge as well, the Forge is another program like this, we're having people practice leading before they're ready, because that's the edge of your leadership. If you're already ready, then that's not leading, you're just managing. You're managing circumstances. Leadership is leaning out over the edge, not having it handled. So imagine with something like Landmark, you've got people that aren't fully ready. They're practicing something new, and they're practicing something new in the face of natural confrontation. And so what that tends to create is a lot of mess. And when we're working with someone in their confrontation, their getting confronted is going to draw out my confrontation. And now we're both confronted. And what that tends to lead to is some wackiness. Again, this isn't to take away from Sarah's experience at all, but rather to help us see how and why things tend to go the way they do without making any of it wrong. That's the challenging part. So one of the things that I've often seen happen, and that I would do a lot of training with people in AC, is, here's a simple example. We'd have them practice enrolling people in the program. And the reason we would do that is, one, if you want to be a coach, part of your job is to go into the world and enroll people in the possibility of their lives. All that means is you talk to them and you have a conversation that isn't just, tell me about the weather. How do you feel about this political candidate? Boy, my pants are neat. Whatever. They are neat pants. I'm just going to give a quick preview. Look at those neat pants. So we have a conversation that opens more possibility than that kind of conversation where we're just talking about how we feel. The conversation we're having is like, so what do you want to do in your life? It's cool. You're working in a linen factory, and I don't know anyone like this. Where do you go from there? Do you want to own one? Like, are you fascinated by linen, or is it just a stopgap? So we have conversations that broaden the possibility in people's lives. And then from there, that naturally leads into like, hey, what would serve this person? And sometimes what's going to serve them is them having a coaching conversation with you. Sometimes what's going to serve them is just you getting them and being like, wow, that's cool. And you being simply fascinated. And sometimes as you talk to people about what they want to do in their lives, you're going to come across some people that want to become a coach. And so the intention behind us supporting our leadership team in enrolling people in this program was so that it's a win-win. They get to practice bringing people into our program, which then grows it and allows more coaches to get the gift of real transformational work. And they get to practice the art and skill of enrollment. But because this is something new that people are practicing, because that they're practicing this in the face of their fears about not wanting to be pushy, but trying to lean out over the edge and being willing to take some risks. And because in doing this, naturally, people at times are going to be confronted, because the mere act of considering possibility is going to drive up some of our fear. So because of all those things, the people that I'm training that are practicing with this are going to get confronted themselves. And when they get confronted, some of the stuff that happens is they might get a little pushy. They might try to convince the person to take this program rather than just stand with them and support them. The only way to learn a mastery in this art is to lean into that mess, to create that mess so you can then see where you went wrong, clean up your mess, and move forward. And on top of all of this, we're humans. We're not perfect automatons. So we're all doing our best. And sometimes we create these messes, and sometimes because we have shame about it or whatever, we don't clean up the messes as artfully as we could, and blah, 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 blah. So then what happens is people are often left with this experience of stuff like Landmark where they're like, oh, it's pushy and gross and it's a cult. And I completely get that. I don't want to take away from their experience at all. But my intention here is to help everyone see with a little more altitude, a little more altitude, more of the picture. So not to change the fact that the experience we may have had in these situations is exactly the way we had that experience, but also just say like, oh, no wonder that makes sense that it might have been that experience. And further, that someone's experience there may well be the thing in the way of that person leaning into them fully creating the clients they want to create because they're like, well, I'm definitely not going to do that. So all of these things can be really part of the picture. And like, what I see and what you wrote, Sarah, Sarah wrote, uh, you felt forced, I think. I said a bunch of, oh, right. The people in the chorus were suggesting to Sarah, I was being told to, in effect, leave him. So first of all, I'm really sorry, that would happen. And um, first of all, any course that's telling you what to do, any transformational, ostensibly transformational work telling you to do a particular thing, well, that's missing the mark because that's not how transformation works. It's not being told to do a thing. Um, that's someone telling you what to do. Sometimes I experience, I saw this a lot in accomplishment coaching where that's not, so I'm going to just trust that's the experience you had, Sarah, and not take away from that at all. And now I want to talk again about this more broadly. Sometimes I would have the experience in accomplishment coaching where people, we wouldn't be telling them something, but they would receive it through that lens. Here's a really simple example. We were training in San Diego, myself, an amazing woman named Denise Yamada, another awesome woman. I'm not going to name names. We don't need to name drop. Anyhow, so myself and Denise were two of the people leading this work, and we were on break. And we were very clear about time, integrity, and starting on time. And so we were outside of the hotel, ballroom, and there was 3 participants coming back, and it was about 10:05. I'm just making up. We'll call it 2:05, and we'd said we were starting prompt at 2. And so those 3 participants were walking back, and Denise turned to them and said, "You're late." And then they walked through. And when we came back into the room, we got off our break, like stuff was happening. We got off our break. Denise and I came in, sat down, and we're checking into the room. What's in the space? Who has something to share? One of those 3 participants shared, I really hate how there's this culture of shaming here. For example, I was coming back from my break, and once again, I'm shamed for being late. Now, that's a fascinating thing because in no way did we shame her for being late. We were simply speaking a fact. You are late. It's 2:05. You are late. That's a reflection. But her lens, the way her listening, the way that landed with her was the reason they're telling, first of all, I am late. Second, that they're pointing that out suggests I don't know it, but they must know that I know it because I don't know, maybe hustling. So the reason they're pointing this out is to shame me. And so you can see very quickly how this stuff can devolve to where people are left in this experience. And then the leadership, either because they don't have enough time or they're trying to do too much, or they just don't have the capacity to hold a container this powerful, or we don't bring the thing, we just let it stew. You can see how quickly we can tumble down the hill and then end up at a place where it's like, this is a culture of shaming. And it's like, no, this is a culture of putting in front of you what you are unwilling to look at and then allowing any of that, what that drives up, to be driven up so that then you can do the work to move past it. So all of that to say, I'm really sorry about the experience that you had, Sarah. That sucks. And it sounds to me like you weren't met where you were at. And, or even if there was an opportunity there, they did not have the capacity and the ability to support you, meet you there, and support you moving through it and seeing it through a different light. And again, that's an if. If there was something for you to take on, they didn't have the capacity to support you with that. And I'm sorry about that. Okay. Um, let's see. I'm just going to read what you guys wrote here. So David says, does the moment come where that reaction doesn't even rise? arise. I think the reaction you're talking about, David, is like when we're confronted with something and we don't have a reaction to it. And yeah, sure. Like part of the transformational journey is kind of we become more willing to be humbled by life, by people, by the moment, by the experience. And so typically what happens is we get a piece of feedback either directly, someone says, "Hey, here's some feedback," or our coach gives it to us, or they just like the feedback comes in the way that like I say something and then someone acts a certain way, like they say "fuck you," or they just don't respond and they get up from the table and they walk away. That's feedback. So initially we have a lot of shame about that because we make it mean a bunch, and then from our shame and blah, 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 it all builds up. And then we're resistant to really taking a look over here because we're just so caught up in all of this stuff. And as we get better and better at pulling all that stuff off, we can identify sooner, oh, what's really at play here is my shame. I don't want to really look at this. And then we can release that stuff faster, and then we can come back to where we are. And in addition to that, we become less reactive. So rather than what typically happens is we have shame and then everything else on layered on top, and then we react from that top layer and do the thing like "fuck you for leaving the table." Instead, what happens over time is we get better at just sitting in the discomfort and then peeling back those layers and being willing to sort of like, oh, this is actually about me. That's what's getting triggered here, and then moving through that. That being said, it always feels uncomfortable initially when your button gets pushed. In my experience, like it never goes away completely. It might be that I kind of overcome the particular trigger around certain areas of my life, but if you're someone committed to transformation, you're almost certainly going to be someone committed to stepping into bigger and bigger areas of your life. You're going to be playing a bigger and bigger game. And as you do, the stakes are higher. And as the stakes raise, it's a new level of trigger. So it's like you're no longer triggered when your friend says the thing that's like normally would have left you feeling stupid. But now when the president of Uganda says it, whatever, that's triggering. And so it's just that's the level of which you're at. So transformation is not about having no triggers, not about having no reaction. It's about expanding our capacity to be with more of life as it shows up. Raf, I love that you experienced this during the second round of Fearless Mastery. That's awesome. What shifted between the first and the second, if you'd be willing to share, that had you experience more of that? Dave says, as an awareness junkie, accomplishment coaching, which Dave is taking, had this amazing kickoff and high. Yeah, totally, right? That first weekend, everything's going to be different. And then Dave says, when that wore off, I got into some serious goo and how to get some action out of it for the first time. Aha. Yeah, that's beautiful. There's a great book called After the Ecstasy, The Laundry. And it's really about this underlying truth that we have this moment of spiritual ecstasy, of awakening, of, oh my God, everything's going to be different. Then we come home and our kids say mean things to us, and there's all those dishes in the sink, and the laundry has to be done. And then what the author talks about is the fact that none of the spiritual narratives in the world, none of the TV shows, none of the books we read that are spiritual narratives have any of that. The narrative ends at the point that the character has the big awakening. So they do all the hard work, they get to the mountaintop, they're like, oh my God, and then the book ends. And so he's speaking about, after the ecstasy, the laundry. Really great book. Andrew, you say, I've been getting supported by my coach and looking at all possibilities for the person in front of me, not necessarily enrolling them into your program or a program, but really ensuring that the person has some level of support in their life. Yeah, that's beautiful. What serves this moment? And what would serve this person in front of me, as opposed to not answering that question for ourselves. So that's where a lot of people go astray. They're like, what does this person need? Great, let's push that. But rather like just sitting in the question. So rather than relating to that question, what would serve this person in front of me, like it's something to be answered, sitting in and coming from that inquiry. It's the questions we're willing to sit in that move us forward much more than the answers we derive from them. This is actually a leadership sand trap, is where people answer every question rather than sit in an inquiry. Sarah, what did you say to follow up? Yes, I received what they were saying through that lens. They didn't say what they do, just use language like, it doesn't sound like he's listening to you. And oh, got it. So they said, Sarah, it doesn't sound like he's listening to you. And I think you're saying you heard that through the lens of they're basically telling me to leave him. And at the same time, I also get it sounds like they didn't kind of fully meet you where you were such that you could hear them differently. As I said, they didn't fully, as Adam said, they didn't fully engage in the story. So I had to interpret for myself, which, as you say, is frustrating. I needed more love at that time. Hence why more transformation happened via Hoffman. Yeah. That's the art of this work is in any transformational work, we're simultaneously playing with two different sets of capacities. There's what is the where is the person's self-limiting belief tell them they need to stop, right? Like I can accept this much feedback but no further. I can lift this much weight at the gym but no more. And there's like a space beyond that that we need to support people stepping into past their level of comfort, past their level of internal self-knowing about what they're capable of for growth to happen. But then there's another threshold beyond that where it's like now we're just doing harm. So as a coach, as a leader, and as someone developing this art in people, we're always looking like how much capacity does this person have in the moment? And I'll share on the Forge, we have the first level, which is like participant. And then the next level is what we call the leader participant. So the leader participants are leading some of the work. We've got structure set up so that they get to actually practice leading and get our feedback on that. And at the same time, they're a fully fledged participant. So they're still going through the program a second time. And one of the things we're really clear with them is we're going to hold you to a higher gradient. What that means is for the participants, they may show up and be like, man, nothing works and I don't want to have a conversation about it. And we're going to reflect that a bit and we're going to invite them outside of it. But if they're like a no, we're like, okay, no problem. Got it. We're going to move on. But for our leader, for the people in the second rung, we're holding them to a higher gradient. So if they're like, man, everything sucks and this program's annoying, it's okay for them to feel that way, but we're also standing for them to actually choose into a conversation to move beyond that, even if they don't want to. So we raise the gradient with them. And the reason we do that is because as you step further and further into leadership, you are in the practice of letting go of the right to hang out in your shit, so to speak, to hang out in your survival mechanism or your shadow. That's challenging. And so people can sometimes at first experience that like, oh, Adam and Bay aren't bringing much heart, or Sarah and Heather, or whoever's leading, whoever's developing leadership. It's not that. It's that we're now standing for a higher gradient of you to step into your work. We do that with a lot of setting up the context for it beforehand for exactly the reason that Sarah's just described here, which is if we don't understand, if we're not choosing into that context at the start, then it can often occur like brutality. Now, it doesn't mean that come that moment when we stand for a higher gradient, that people are going to be like, oh, this is great. I'm so glad we had that conversation about a higher gradient. Let's do it. No, they often still experience it that way. And that's okay. That's an inevitable part of the process. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing about your experience. That's so I think that's really valuable for all of us, not just in the context of like landmark, but in the context of transformational work in general. I guess the other thing I'll say is that most transformation gets missed and stepped over because rather than be willing to say something like you're late and then have that person feel shamed, and if we wanted to follow that track, right, I feel shamed. And then the next place is this place doesn't feel safe for me to express myself fully because it's rife with shame. This isn't the place for me. I'm going to leave, right? You can see very quickly how we could get there. So rather than bring that reflection forward and then clean up any mess and continue to stand for that person to step beyond their own level of comfort and their own stories about what is and isn't true, most people just avoid cleaning up that, making that mess in the first place. And then what you get is places that people relate to as safe, but that's all they are. They're safe, but there's no transformation. And so, the ball kind of gets missed there. Yeah, Heather, whoop, I just about spilled tea on my keyboard. I could have gotten myself a new keyboard. Heather's right on the money. The leader level, the level of gradient that the leader is in, that says I'm a yes to a higher level of gradient, we want to make sure they're agreeing to that. And so It doesn't mean you won't feel confrontation. It doesn't even mean in the moment that you are kind of like, fuck off, because that's part of our confrontation. But we are getting clear and making sure you're a yes to that so we can do our work with you. Raf talking about what shifted from the first to the second round of the Fearless Mastery that he's in. That's a program run by one of my clients and a beautiful man, Leo Baboda, which I highly recommend you follow his work. Raf says, what shifted for me from the first to the second round was noticing my tendency to always have some enlightened answer to what people were bringing into the space. So great, right? By the end of the first round, my group mates saw me as having abundant wisdom, and I thought I was open, but I was ready with an answer for everything, which didn't leave space to just be with what was coming up. Yeah, that's really, really great noticing, Raf. Letting go, a lot of one of the shaman I worked with for a while shared with me the archetype that most embodies wisdom is that of the fool, the willingness to blunder into life and to trust the wisdom that comes forward from there. Whereas, always having the enlightened answer, that doesn't really allow much wisdom at all to come forward, does it? Because it's kind of like, well, I already have the answer and it's my wisdom. And it's like, no, that's going to end up being a pretty cloistered world. Okay, great conversation, guys. Let's go to let's see. Well, Cam and David both asked a really great question. I'm going to read both of them out loud and then we'll get into them. So Cam says, how do you help loved ones see the patterns of negative behaviors in their own life so they can get to the awareness stage without you yourself being preachy and right in your approach? And then David asks a similar question, which is, where's the balance between seeing and relating to your intimate partner as God? So kind of like, this is perfect. There's nothing that needs to be changed over here, with no agenda and detached, as with a client, from your own. So seeing your client as perfect, not needing them to get anywhere, and then the balance between that and offering what you see for them to work on and to work through. So kind of the same question, which is really like, I can see stuff over there. What do I do about it? How do I offer that to my partner? So this is, first of all, like classic early coach challenges. When someone starts to get some transformation under their belt, when someone starts to create some awareness, the first thing that happens is they see that same thing everywhere in their life. Just like if you buy a red car, suddenly the whole world's driving red cars, and you never knew, and now you can see it everywhere. So as soon as we start to see something here, we're like, oh my God, I can see it everywhere. And then we want to bring it to our partner. The trouble with trying to like bring something to our partner is we're in it with them. So it would be like we've got the yin and the yang logo, white and black, swirling around each other. It would be like the yin trying to point to the black in the yang. But if you remember that logo, the yin has, are you guys doing? Someone's riding a motorbike out there. Those two parts of the whole of the Tao, of the yin yang, have each other's color in them. So all that to say, whatever you point to in your partner is part and parcel part of what you're bringing. Here's the simplest example. You will notice if you listen to people talk about their relationships that some people complain about narcissism. The people that complain about the narcissism in their partners typically are unwilling to take up any of their own space or are quite narcissistic themselves. And those two things are kind of like the reciprocal. A reciprocal in math is like 2/3. The reciprocal of that is 3/2. So we just magically, without any ability to control, it's irresistible, are going to end up with partners who operate as our reciprocal. And so if I'm like, my partner never takes up space in the room and it's so annoying because I feel like I have to manage her and blah, blah, blah. You know what she's going to tell me? She's going to be like, Adam, you take up all the fucking space. There's never any room for me. And the beauty in that is that it's the perfect excuse for both of us to continue our patterns. It's the perfect excuse for me to continue taking up space because this one's never willing to. And it's the perfect excuse for her to never take up space because this one's never willing to allow her to take up space. So it's as a starting point for all this, we got to recognize that's the dynamic. For whatever it is that you see for your partner to take on, that's also your work, and or you are the reciprocal to that work. You are contributing to the very thing that you want to point to and invite them to take on themselves. So what then, Adam? What do we do? Are we just effed? How do we resolve this? Don't you worry, I have answers. The first thing is that this is why working with a counselor or a therapist or a relationship something, or even like a relationship doula, if that's the thing, or a coach that works with both of you. That doesn't have to be a relationship coach, because relationship is just one area of coaching the way someone bees. And a really profound coach is going to find your being present in everything you do. So I often coach a lot of my clients in their relationships, because the way they show up in their business is the same way they show up in their relationships. But what I'm really saying here is that having someone off the court, someone outside of your yin yang swirl with your partner, is imperative, because they can actually point to this stuff without being inside of it with you. And that's invaluable. In fact, it's essential. We have a paradigm in, at least in Western society, that you would seek out that kind of support when your relationship is on the rocks or broken, and not until. And once you get out of that awful place, you don't keep working with that person. That paradigm is everywhere, and it does tremendous damage to our capacity to have really thriving relationships. So that's the first thing, is if we really want to do this, be proactive. Get the support of someone, anyone outside of your relationship. Don't make it a friend, not even if they're a friend with both of you. That's going to cause all kinds of problems, because your friends are embroiled in your world. So make it someone that is outside, that's not a friend, and that is like an actual relationship you're investing in. That's how Bay and I invest in our relationship. We invest in teachers and a counselor, and sometimes have our coaches support us, so that our relationship continues to grow and to thrive. So that's the first thing, is have a third party supporting you in this. The other thing is that the thing we see over there, that's our work to take on. So if I'm like, my partner's such a narcissist, the way that I change that is I be willing to bring my work to my coach, and to stop looking at what my partner's not doing, and to turn the gaze here, and to look and be like, what is my role in that? Who am I being that has my partner do all of these things that I'm complaining about? And what is there for me to take on? So we turn the lens back to ourselves. And so for that person complaining about their partner being a narcissist, the immediate place I'm going to start to get curious is, first of all, what do you actually want? Like if they, let's take them out of the picture. What is it you want in your life and your expression of self that is making impossible? And let's imagine they don't change, but we're going to look at what you want to create. And in this fabricated person, they're going to be like, I want to have more of the spotlight on me. Great. So now where we're going to look is, how does this person avoid the spotlight? How does this person shunt the spotlight away? For example, by pointing to your partner. Once again, look at you. You're making them the narcissist. You're putting the spotlight on them instead of looking here. Meta, right? It all leads back within. What is unsafe for you getting to be in the spotlight? Why do you think you've learned not to do that? All of these sort of questions. And what's going to magically happen is that as the person I'm in conversation with starts to transform, that's going to create transformation over there and everywhere else in their life. So as that person starts to more boldly hold the spotlight for themselves, and as that person starts to do things like, hey, I want to actually finish what I'm saying. Can you just let me finish for a sec? Maybe at first quite clumsily and aggressive, but over time more artfully. As that person starts to hold their own space, their partner is going to do one of two things. One, they're going to clash with them anyhow initially, because that implied agreement is going to be violated, right? The implied agreement in this relationship is you get to have the spotlight and I get to not have it. Now that's going to get broken up, and there's going to be some conflict at first, as there must be. Then over time, this partner might leave. That's always a risk. But in any committed relationship, what tends to happen is this person starts to take up less space, because now this person's taking up more space. And slowly but surely, this person's going to start to, one, be confronted by their own fears of not taking up all the space, because they're doing this for their own reasons. They're going to start to move through those, and they're going to start to discover a level of peace that exists when they don't have to fill all the space. So a big part of this is a willingness to trust in yourself, that as you do your work, whatever there is to happen around you will take care of itself. The work is always back over here, not with your partner. The final part of this, and the reason I'm leaving it to the very last, is because the risk is I say this and then people just hear this last bit and it invalidates everything I said. So like everything I just said is the heart and soul of the matter. Here's the last piece is, if we do think our partner would really benefit from some kind of support, I always want to check very carefully with them, first to see that they actually want it, then to see if they actually want it. Because if you say, hey, I have something for you, do you want it? Like what I noticed the dynamic in my relationship is they will come to me like with a problem and I want to solve it. So I'll be like, hey, do you want to hear what I think you should do? And she'll answer yes, but she doesn't actually. She thinks that's what she wants, and I want that to be what she wants. But underneath that, really what's there, she wants to more often than not be heard. And the hard part about relationships is that like sometimes she's not even aware that's what she wants, and she'll actively resist it, fighting for me to try to solve this for her. So that's part of the challenge in the relationship, is that we get drawn into that pattern with each other. And then I'm trying to solve it. And then she's like, I don't feel like you're listening to me. And I'm like, and I'm tearing my hair out and she's tearing hers out. And so we have to be really cautious. We have to, again, feel like what really would serve this person. And if I'm going to offer something, I would offer it in the most tenderest, gentlest of ways possible, and not when they're caught in, not when they're really in the weeds of it, but on the, like when they're feeling kind of more empowered in their life and back on their feet. I'd be like, hey, I get a lot from working with my coach or whatever, and I think you would really benefit from that. And I would love to, like, if there's any conversation for us to have, I would love to support you in getting the same kind of support I get in my life for you. That's probably as far as I would go with it. Far more enrolling and trying to get your partner into that kind of relationship is just to really empower it in your own life. Here's the last, this is a kind of a metaphor for how this shows up outside a relationship. There's someone that, he's a person that got referred to me and he really loves my work. And the irony is he's always like, Adam, how do I, he kind of shows up and then disappears. And then he shows up and then disappears, usually every 8 months or so. And when he shows up, one of his consistent things is like, oh, I've got a friend I really want to have work with you. How do I like enroll them in that? But he's I think unable to see how unwilling he is to do his own work with me. So he's trying to get other people to get the gift of my work, but not really being willing to like receive it himself. And it never works, right? Because why would we buy that from someone who we can see isn't, on some level we experience, they're not buying it themselves. So why would I buy it? And further, their insistence that I do it is kind of suspect. Here's another example. The last one I'll give is someone locally reached out to me and was like, hey, I've got this friend. His life is all over the map and he's a real mess. And I really think he should work with a coach. So, but if I say that to him, he's going to be resistant. So what I'm thinking we should do is like, maybe you can come with me. He's working out at the gym, and I'll tell him you're my coach, and then that'll encourage him to connect with you. That's, hopefully you can hear, that's fucked. that's the opposite of everything this work is about. Like, we're not trying to trick people into that kind of work, right? And further, the being underneath that is like, I've got my life sorted out and I don't need this, but you're a mess. So, and you're such a mess, I can't even invite you to that kind of support, so I got to trick you into it. Whether or not that's ever spoken, it's conveyed in the energy. So none of that happened, as you can imagine, and I didn't hear from that person ever again. He didn't like that I invited him to first be willing to partake of the work himself. Take a sip of your own medicine first, my friend. Okay, you guys have been quiet. What are you getting from this? Is anyone picking anything up? Anyone taking anything away? Britta. I think it's Britta. No, it's Brita. Brita and Andrew ask a similar question. Brita says, being patient with the process and not expecting results now. Talk about that, Adam. Great. And then Andrew asks it kind of a similar way. How do you process going through a long period of time when you haven't enrolled a new client? How do I process that? Well, there was a tremendous amount of growth during all this. It's been a challenge not to make it about what I'm doing or who I'm being as a result. So let's straighten my back. There, did that, achieved that. Let's talk. This is kind of a funny thing because the path of transformation is fundamentally a spiritual path. That doesn't mean you have to like immediately drop everything you're trying to do and then like meditate or find God or anything like that. But what it means is that like underneath all of it, there is like a degree of every step along that journey is a step where you move closer to trusting yourself, where you move closer to trusting the innate goodness in others, and where you move closer to trusting the innate goodness in spirit, in the world at large, in the universe. You can already see before we say anything more that that is you can't just dive into that and like look no further than the politics of the world, right? Like they're polarized and they're you're fucking around and you're fucking around, and that like there's not a lot of trust in the innate goodness in others and any of that. And so it doesn't mean we dive headfirst into the deep end, but just like it's worth beginning this conversation by pointing to like that is at the heart of what happens as we continue to transform. It's also why people that are transformed tend to have like a real, when we're around them, there's like a lot of spaciousness. There's a lot of like breath available. There's not a lot of like, their speed is slower than what we're used to because they can trust like whatever there is to come forward is coming forward anyhow. It doesn't require me to run around and get a bunch of stuff handled and manage my time and blah, blah, blah. So what happens as we move on this path is we're letting go of trying to force something to happen, to effort something into existence so that we can plug into what's underneath. We can plug into ourselves and really live from that place and then trust the results will follow. So in the Creating Clients course, and I'm mentioning this sort of as an example of how this shows up, early on, most people come into that course and they're like, I need clients 10 weeks ago. They're thirsty, they're scared, they're a bit desperate, they're kind of like anxious, they're really needy. And further, that neediness comes across in their energy. We can feel it. You can feel it in most of the posts where people share testimonials about like that someone has done it, or they share like, so proud of my client, they achieved this. And a lot of that, like underneath it, if you feel into it, is kind of like, it's not really about the client, it's the coach sort of like often proving to the world that they're worth it. Like there's a look, hire me because look what happened over there, and it can happen for you, couched in celebrating the client. And so we feel all of that and it gets conveyed in all these subtle ways. And so one of the things that happens right at the start in the Creating Clients course, the first things we say that people don't love is secure a source of income. Get yourself some income. That doesn't have to be a job. But get something. So when I started out, we'd saved up $8,000, which is a pittance. And I think we were spending about $2,000 a month. And then we had a line of credit with $100,000 of debt, but a line of credit secured against the remaining equity in our home. So I did not have a job once I left law. I did have a job for a little bit, but at this point I'm talking about, I had $8,000 in the bank and then a line of credit. But that was a source of income. So that meant I didn't have to frantically get a client in order to eat food. And fundamentally, this is the spiritual journey that we're talking about. So for what a lot of people try to do is they notice they're not leaning into their fear. So they kind of try to do a burn the boats thing where they quit their job and they're like, now I have to do it. which is true. They'll take action, but the action they're taking is from this terrified, needy, desperate way of being. So even though what's happening on the surface is different, the underlying experience is there's no actual change, because it's just they've traded in one kind of way of being for another, and both of them are fundamentally disempowering. So happens with coaches, happens with everyone. We sort of have to start off by ensuring that we can, before we can let go of everything, we have to get there slowly. So the first step is, let's make sure that you've got some income. Let's make sure that you're going to be okay, so you can start trying to trust a little bit. Then over time, we can start to build this up. There was a period this year where I don't think I created a client for about 10 months. That feels about right. That was my subjective experience anyhow. If we went and looked, it might be 8, it might be 12. There was other stuff happening, like the creating clients course had 13 people, 16 people, and then the most recent one, 10 people. So that's, I don't know, that's like $40,000 of revenue that came in. So there's stuff happening, but I just want to like try not to let that blind you to the thing that I'm going to share. And what I would invite you to do is see your own experience in my experience, rather than like, well, it's different for Adam. It's actually not. We're actually in the same place. So what happened? 10 months, right? That's a long time. And I'm not sitting fallow. I'm not idle during those 10 months. It wasn't that I was like, I don't want a client for 10 months and then empowered that. I was in a lot of conversations, and a lot of people I really wanted to create as clients because they were inspiring. They were cool. I became enrolled in their possibility and their lives as they became enrolled in it, because we enrolled each other together. So we built that together. We built this possibility in their lives, and then they'd get scared or get confronted or just choose out. And, it's heartbreaking when that happens. And often worth saying, when they choose out, to avoid having to be with their own heartbreak, they can kind of like just ghost, or just like, you're great, Adam, bye, it's nice, see you later, and then just never talk to me again. So in order to avoid fully being with the heartbreak that's present in our relationship, they do that, and then I'm like, fuck. So that's frightening, right? That's confronting. And if the Adam in the early days had that same experience, like if Adam, when he started this out 10 years ago, went 10 months without creating a client, he would have been really terrified. It would have been really challenging and edgy for me. So my capacity to be with this kind of thing has grown. That's part of what allowed, and so let me unpack this. One, I have a greater capacity to be with not seeing a result for longer. I have a greater capacity to trust that things will work out. That being said, I was still, as time went on, I got more and more confronted. My capacity to trust the spirit, the universe, was at its edge. It was expanding, but it was at its edge. So I was getting more and more frustrated, scared, angry, annoyed, all of that stuff. Um, Consequently, this is worth mentioning, the fact that I have a greater capacity to trust in spirit and to let go of trying to force things to happen, and further to trust that I will be okay, even if I don't get hired for 10 months, allows me to, one, be less attached, and two, to work with a higher level of commitment. And what I mean by that is higher rates, higher financial rates. I can tell people it costs more to work with me, knowing less people will actually be a yes to that, and being okay with that because I can last longer. A lot of people come into this game with a sense of entitlement, in part that's puffed up by coaches they're working with, saying like, they do it from a well-intended place, but they're sort of like, you were a high-level executive and you did this and you blah, blah, blah. And sometimes that's not untrue, but then the person comes into it and they're like, yeah, I'm going to be a high-paying coach. I don't want to charge that much money, blah, blah, blah. But they haven't built their own ability to trust spirit and to be with that, to have that kind of capacity. And so they just collapse. From that sort of entitled sense of like, I should be able to charge whatever, not even looking if whether they've actually earned it as a coach. They feel that the work they did as an executive entitles them to it. But that'd be a little bit like if you were a lawyer and then you came into a job playing professional baseball and was like, I should just be paid blah, 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 blah. No, you shouldn't. Well, yeah, I should. I represented baseball players. I know the ins and outs of the game. Doesn't matter. It's a different thing. So people, all of this sort of stuff is in the space. They think that having a position as a CEO is the same thing as what they're going to do as a coach, but it's not. I'm going to read some of what you guys said, and then I'll come back to this. Um, Heather, you say, so some of the stuff that you've gotten from the conversation, Heather, you're saying, I so get how difficult the relationship work is when we are wanting to be healthier in our relationship and is our work. Yeah, it's really hard because we can see with such clarity over there on the other side, such clarity. Uh, what's the word? Deceptive clarity. It's deceptive, the clarity that we think we see. Jess, you say the idea that we create patterns in relationship to perpetuate our default actions and thoughts is so fascinating. Subconsciously, that is to say, being with someone who needs to be in the spotlight so that we don't have to take up space. Isn't that amazing? And if you've ever, if you want to learn more about that dynamic, I would suggest the book by Harville Hendricks called Getting the Love You Want. He founded, I think he was one of the founders of Imago Therapy, which looks at relationship entirely through this lens. It's phenomenal work. And a lot of what I do in coaching in relationship holds that. We're holding that in the back of our minds. And I'm looking forward to that too. Andrew says, yes, it's been pointing out to me that I trust spirit, but only to a certain point. And that's the same for all of us, right? How is your trusting spirit is not a on or off, it's a capacity. Trust is a capacity that we have. So how much capacity to trust myself do I have? Meaning, how much am I willing to make a mistake and trust that I can remedy it? How much am I willing to trust that I can make a mess and make it right on the other side? And how much can I trust other people? And how much can I trust spirit? So it's a gradient rather than an on off. Dave says, when talking about partners with narcissistic traits and the other person not taking up space, it's such an interesting journey to explore the lack of safety the person not taking up space feels. Is it a legitimate danger to take up space? Is it just self-management thing? What does this person actually want? Lack of safety is a trump card for our shadow. That does not mean that there are not legitimate cases where there is a lack of safety. It just means that whilst there are legitimate times when there is a lack of safety is a trump card for a shadow. And so we always want to really, like when I'm working with someone, this is part of, people call this being trauma informed. I would call it being informed or really being transformatively in relationship with people. When someone talks about a lack of safety, the first thing to do is to say, like, is there actually a lack of safety? Like, are you at risk of coming under harm? Is there actually a risk here that you're going to get hurt? Do we need to get you in a counseling like relationship? Is there some sort of therapeutic thing here? And a lot of coaches shy away from that because for a variety of reasons. So we need to address that when it comes up so that then we can, got it. So that's not, okay, you're all right. Okay, great. So then I would like to work with that lack of safety like it's a function, a trump card of your shadow. Are you a yes to that? Great. Then we can go into it, right? Then we can get back to holding this person whole and complete and be powerful with them. Anna, you're saying it's worked in our relationship. I needed what Anna's describing. It's worked in her relationship to put the attention over here. I needed to truly let go and set my own boundaries and stuff first. Now we are both in the work. Anna, can you share a little bit about what I love the story, right? Like you really wanted something for your partner and maybe you can just share a little bit more about what you had to let go of to allow things to grow. Dave, you say, oh my gosh, I planned to blow the doors off Enrolling into my practice at the beginning and didn't plan to have money. It was so painful and reverberates. Yeah, right. Like that's kind of our fantasy a little bit, right? Oh, I'm gonna show up and do this, and it's gonna be amazing, which is awesome. And we can serve people so much more powerfully when our own needs are met. It's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We can't jump to self-actualization at the top of that pyramid. I know there's more to the pyramid. I know that it's been disproven, but it doesn't matter. We can't jump straight there until we've got food and water on our table. So we must make sure we have food and water on our table. Andrew, you're saying it's a weird feeling because I'm developing in a lot of ways, but that my actual business growth is going backwards. What Andrew's describing is exactly what often happens when we start to choose into a transformational process. At first, things get worse because we're letting go of the strategies that have allowed us to stay here right now. And what happens when we experience ourselves starting to go backwards is that we go, something is wrong. And then we clutch more desperately to the stuff that we used to know. And so this is what you could call resisting a breakdown. The breakdown is, fuck, things aren't getting better. The fantasy I had of transformation is not coming true. I'm not doing what I say I'm going to do. And in fact, things are getting worse. I need to get out of this. And that's the thing we must go into. That's, as Leon Vanderpool puts it, the perfect function of dysfunction. That has to show up. Jess says this reminds her of the graph I've posted, outlining the linear versus exponential transformational paths and how there are points where it feels like you're falling behind. Yeah, I'll draw it with my finger right here. So the linear graph is a graph given by the equation y equals mx plus b. We all remember that in math. So wherever it's a line that starts somewhere and then it moves in a straight line. And you can adjust the slope of that graph so you can make it so the line goes sharper or whatever, but it doesn't really matter because the acceleration along that line is linear. It's you move along a straight line. If you want to get better results, then you need to put in more inputs, and that's the end of the story. That's incidentally part of when people are when coaches and service professionals get scared about scaling. It's because they're thinking in terms of a linear expansion. So they're looking and they're like, I spend this much time currently and I make this much money. And so if I want to make that much money, I'm going to have to spend that much time. Oh my God, I can't scale. And they get really concerned and blah, blah, blah. So the linear graph looks like that straight line. An exponential graph is given by the equation y equals x squared. And that is an equation that starts out straight and then very quickly becomes a curve that starts to almost look like a vertical line. It never becomes a true vertical line, but its slope becomes sharper and sharper and sharper. Now there's a period at the start. If this is our linear graph and this is our exponential graph, there's a period where moving along the exponential line, you're going to see a growing gap between your friends or your old self progressing linearly and where you are along the exponential graph. And then slowly but surely, the exponential graph starts to curve up and then it overtakes and then vastly outshoots the linear graph. It's that part in between. I'm with you, Dave. I can hang with your calculus jokes. It's this part between the two graphs, the gap between what's actually happening exponentially and what's happening linearly, that is terrifying. When I first made this decision into this career, what I saw were my friends overtaking me, like big time. They were like one friend got married in Mexico, and I couldn't, I loved that guy and we really wanted to go to his wedding and we couldn't. We could have, I guess, but it just wasn't, when we looked at our finances, our commitments, what we were committed to, all of that stuff. And I guess maybe what I was, the possibility I could be with, I had to say no to that. That was not on the cards for me. And, friends were buying houses or getting promotions in their jobs or getting raises and stuff like that. And it was hard not to be jealous. And it was hard not to feel like I had made a terrible, terrible mistake. Terrible mistake. And then there was a point where financially, the amount of money I was earning had kind of caught up to what they were doing, but the amount of investment I was making was meant that while my revenue looked like their income, my actual living was very small. All of that money was it was like the tide coming in and then flowing right back out. And then over time, what happened, and not surprisingly, in partnership with moving beyond money and starting to let this not be, hey Alexandra, starting to have this not be so significant at all, what I noticed is my earning vastly outstripped theirs. And not because they're doing something wrong or that they don't love what they're doing or even because they should be making more money or anything like that, but that's the nature of being on an exponential curve. This is also what happens when um, you'll hear people say stuff like, if you're a coach in your own work, you're going to get people time to time that'll say, now's not the time, but I'm going to work with you someday. And more often than not, they won't. And the reason is that they're not getting supported this way by their own coach. They're waiting until the time. And what they don't realize is you're on an exponential curve. So that means your life is going to grow exponentially. The kind of people you work with is going to grow exponentially. The amount of rates you're charging is going to grow exponentially. Often, not always, doesn't have to be, but often that's the case. And you're simply going to outpace them. And so right now, the gap between where you are and where they are is like that big, and it's a scary gap, but it's not an issue. But then over time, that gap's just going to widen. They're thinking it's going to shrink because they're relating to you as like a fixed object, working with you as a fixed point, and they're slowly going to catch up to it. But that's not the way it works. So just slowly but surely, you'll just recede out of their possibility, more so than you already are. Okay, I'm going to read what you wrote, Anna, and then I'm going to just come back to this last little bit that we're talking about. And I think we'll wind down for today there. So Anna says, sure, I'll share. I was super attached to Peter having his own coach because I could see so much for him and also for our relationship. And I saw myself less responsible at the time since I had a really fancy coach. What Anna means is less responsible for what was happening in the relationship. I've got a fancy coach. Anna and I were working together at this time. And so it's not mine, it's his. She says, I still remember one really tearful coaching conversation when I began to see how much is about me actually not setting proper boundaries, but getting all tangled up and having him need to get somewhere, so we could finally be the happy couple, which is totally a pattern of mine. So Anna says, I took on the work, began to set boundaries, follow through on what made me happy, which then created a sort of vacuum on the other end over time, which allowed, basically created an invitation for her partner to step into something. So it's interesting, right? Often our energy and relationship is kind of towards and into the partner, but what actually creates transformation is a willingness to create that vacuum. It kind of a funny thing. It's the nature of transformation. It grows and comes into being less from us doing something and more from us allowing something. So to tie up what we were talking about with regards to like being patient with the process, not expecting results now, we first have to really, we have to make sure that we can eat, that our family is cared for, all of that sort of stuff. In the moment, we have to do that. What a lot of people try to do is they're like, I need to make sure that for the next 10 years, if the world collapses, my family is fed. That's noble, but that's a real severe lack of trust in yourself and your family. Like, this is usually people that have like multiple degrees, that have attained like some degree of like corporate executive leadership, or like, they don't need to plan out for 10 years, but that's what they're doing because that's the level of trust they have in themselves and in others and in spirit. There's a very minuscule amount of trust. So what allows us to be patient with the process, what allows us to let go of how it goes, is first making sure that we've got that handled, that we can feed our people, blah, blah, blah. We've already covered that. And then the next is that like working with someone that can support us to step more deeply and grow our capacity to trust. And what happens as you develop that quality in yourself and as yourself, trust as yourself, your need for results starts to slip away. Never fully goes away, but it starts to slip away. Well, who knows? Maybe it does fully go away. I don't know. It's becoming less and less relevant for me. And as that starts to slip away, what magically happens is you can show up with people and truly serve them because you're not attached to anything. You don't need them to receive your service because you don't need them to hire you. And therefore, them accepting your service is like, that's okay if they want it or not, right? You can give the gift free of any obligation. I'm going to give them this gift because I think that would feel good. I'm okay if they don't like the socks. I'll be like, no problem. Exchange them for something else. I'm not going to do it for you. But what happens is our need for what we have to offer being received a certain way falls away, and then it can be offered free of any obligation, which means people can receive it free of any obligation. And then from there, results show up. So really what we're talking about here is rather than forcing results, as you deepen this kind of capacity in yourself to trust more, you become a clearing in which results can show up. To bring it back to this great analogy of the vacuum that Anna just brought forward, and I really like that, you basically create like a lack of need, a lack of neediness for results, and then they can show up. When we're actively trying to force something, it's really hard for it to show up. Jess, you're saying I feel like this creating the vacuum also applies to pre-relationships. Rather than chasing someone to be in a relationship with, working to create the space for the person to choose into. Yeah. There's an interesting tension between these parts as probably everyone can kind of hear, right? Because on the one hand, the temptation would be just to sit back and do nothing and then maybe call it manifesting. Look at this picture of me at the beach. Here I am manifesting my next client. The opportunity is for us to stay in action. So Leo mentioned this last week, and I'll say it again this week. Just these last 10 months, I was not in a lack of action. I'm still very committed to serve people. I'm still very committed to create connection. I'm still very committed to invite people into a coaching relationship with me because that is my art as it is expressed. That is the way I serve the world. I'm committed to serving the world. But I take that committed action and I release my attachment to how it goes. So that's the transcendence here. We want to not be resigned. Fuck it, what's the point? I'll just sit on the beach like this and not do anything, and I'll call it the surrender experiment. That is not what Michael Singer did in his book. If you notice in his book, for anyone who's read the surrender experiment, Michael Singer took a lot of action. He co-created with the universe. So it's not that we resign and just do whatever, I'm going to stay in bed and call it manifesting, but we also release, we're also not attached. I have to make a result happen. I'm going to call 50,000 people and blah, blah, blah. And what's tricky about all of this is there's no right answer. So for some people listening, what there is for them to hear, well, they know better than I, but like there will be some people for what there is for them to hear is, oh, I need to let go of my attachment to how this is received. And then for other people, the thing that's there for them to hear is, oh, even though it's great for me to be unattached, I got to get committed and take committed action because otherwise nothing's going to happen. Nothing will change until I start taking action in my life. It's just fantasy up to that point. Alexandra modeling spirit and magic here, right? This is so beautiful. I'm going to share a couple practices with you guys in spirit again. But Alexandra comes on and just says, this hits home in so many ways. And I caught this topic without knowing what started it, magic. Here are some cool practices for spirit, like really small, simple ones. First, put your playlist on random, go for a walk, and then trust that every song that comes up is exactly the song you need to hear. Don't skip it. If you're like, this song, it's so aggressive. Why? What is it about hearing an aggressive song in this moment that's there for you to listen to? What is that calling forward? So that's a great way to practice spirit, is that sort of thing. Second, scroll through Facebook and then stop the scroll and then read whatever there is to read and trust that that is the thing that's there for you to read in this moment, that spirit is putting that in front of you. So a lot of these practices can sound like nonsense, right? Esoteric. What is that going to get me? How's that going to get me a result? What it is it's you practicing, trusting something beyond ourselves, something even beyond our knowing, and that there is some divinity working through all of us, working through each and every moment and present in each and every moment. That's the game. So you can take on practices like that, and that's going to start to have you trust spirit just a little bit more and coming from that place. And the neat thing about this spirit, we could also call it magic, is that I'm going to use the word magic because it's a little pithier what I'm about to say. Magic is there and it's available, but only to those of us that are willing to believe in it. As soon as you say, I don't believe in magic, but prove to me that it exists, well, that's impossible. The only way you get to live a life with magic in it is by beginning the practice of trusting it. And that doesn't have to be all or nothing. You start with these small gradients. So that's where you get to start. Put that playlist on, flip that scroll, open a book and read. Let's open a book and read. We'll just do the practice right now. Here's what I opened to. I'm going to read it. One of the characteristics of modern day living is that things tend to want to move fast. There is a desire to get somewhere, and the faster that somewhere is arrived at, the better. Why faster is better, in quotes, is not always understood, but collectively, we seem to be buying into a meme that says it is. Have you noticed this sense of quickening, as though everything is moving faster, including the pace at which you move through the days? I certainly feel it, and I have noticed how the quickening is negatively affecting people's stress levels and their ability to relax, enjoy, and be present in each moment. Spirit gives us that in this moment, so we let it go. Let's see what you guys finished with. Andrew, it's definitely coming together. I've enjoyed putting the steps into place that came from the Creating Clients course and AC. It's a place of patience and trust. And it also does feel good to hear your perspective on the journey as well. Anytime. And I'm also happy anytime you want me to share about the places, situations, and times when it's been a struggle to trust. I got a whole litany of those. I can unfurl a scroll and read them to you. Jess says, less results focused, more in the flow of aligned action. And Anna says, for some, it's both action and surrender. For all, yeah, exactly, Anna. Like for some people, what there is to hear is the opportunity to be in committed action and relinquish surrender to the way it's going. That's tough, right? Because, during those 10 months, over time, at first it was easy, right? Like I'd have a conversation with someone and they'd be like, yeah, not now. I don't think it's the time. And I'd be like, okay, cool. No worries at all. I was super unattached. And then as time got on, every subsequent no, and then like, not just the no's, then it was like people not responding to me. It became more and more significant. And part of what there was for me to realize was like, oh, I'm not releasing the way it's gone in the past. So that's one of the things I was incomplete. I was holding on to this energy about like, well, the last 10 people, so it's never going to work. Incidentally, I'm not often a fan of sharing this stuff, but it's nice to have a happy ending to a story. So like, I had one client just renew. It was the easiest renewal ever. And it was really cool because we got on the call and I was like, great. So what, we were on the call to talk about what was next. And I was like, so what do you see as next? And he was like, well, things are great. There's a time in the future where I think we want to work together. But like for now, I'm thinking like maybe we could just, have some check-in or something once a month. And I was like, great. So it sounds like what this person wants is, just a casual conversation. I'm a yes to that. We don't have to pay for that. That's totally free. And I was like, I just want to offer one way to look at this, I was saying to my client, so that you can see it through a slightly different lens, which is even though things are good, there's always the opportunity for more work. So your transformation doesn't require that things are hard for it to be available to you. And so I'm not telling you this so you choose in, I'm telling you this so that whatever you choose, it's from a place where you can see all of the possibility available to you. And so as we just talked about that, I was not trying to get him anywhere. He got himself over the course of an hour from like, I just want to talk once. He was like, you know what? This is crazy. I want to enroll my employers in paying for this. They're crazy not to be a yes to this. And so then we just supported him in that conversation. And then he messaged me the next day and he's like, okay, we're going to do it. So like that happened. We've had just a tremendous influx into the Forge of demand and phenomenal people, leaders, coaches, people up to amazing stuff. There's another person that is coming on as a client. So all like a tremendous shift over the last couple of months. And it's worth saying none of that shift happened until I was able to unburden myself from the stuff I was holding on to that was like, that I was tight about, all the stuff that wasn't working in the past. To finish up, hey, Jess, nice to have you with us. Jessica, I don't know, tell me which you prefer. I've been lost in inaction. I just wrote on my mirror that June will be a focus of staying in action connected to source. My success in life was done with effort and I have pendulum swinged. Really great awareness. Really, really great awareness to go from like efforting everything to then like, I'm not going to do any effort, as opposed to like, which keeps us on the same spectrum, as opposed to transcending. which is like, okay, I'm going to be committed in the action, and who am I going to be about this? I'm going to surrender while staying in action. I've got a call in 10 minutes. I'd love to stay and talk longer. And then I'd love to invite all of you over to my house where I could make you cocktails and we could have a barbecue and it'll be amazing. And I want to make that happen for the intensive. Somehow I'm going to try to, because the intensive's here in Victoria, and I want to host people in our backyard so they get to experience this glorious weather and enjoy Victoria that way. But that's about a year out. So it's there. We're going to make it happen somehow. But for now, we'll have to wait. Hey, Jenna. I love all of you. I mean that sincerely from the bottom of my heart. It's an absolute treat to get to spend this time. What an awesome way to get to spend a month off in a conversation with this, learning what I get to learn in partnership with all of you and distinguishing this stuff. Thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing. You know, whatever extent you are, it might be that the work you're currently taking on is just being in this conversation, not just, right, but like being in this conversation and seeing something for yourself. That's part of the work. So whether it's awareness, whether it's making new commitments, whether it's reaching out to people, myself, other people for conversation, whatever it is, I honor you for the work that you're taking on. And now I'm going to go and pee, and then I'm going to go and sit in a park with a friend, and we're going to drink a beer. Shh, it's a secret beer. Don't tell anyone. And we're going to start this weekend off right. Love you guys. Take care. See you soon.